All right, let's begin. So this is the 99 bottles challenge. I'm going to go through those steps that we went through just before, just to make sure that, again, we have repetition here. But the first thing I need to do is fork this over to my personal GitHub. So I'm going to click fork, select my personal GitHub. That should take, a good 5 seconds maybe, doing its thing. Okay, and then I'm going to grab the URL from the code button, copy the URL, go to my terminal. I don't want to put it in my def gamma challenge. I want to put in a new challenge folder. So I'll do git clone, paste my URL that I just copied.
Sorry.
Enter, and now it cloned that down. So we do an ls lists contents of my current directory. So notice I have 3 folders in here. I have algo 99 bottles, algo def gamma, day 1 example. Let's cd into algo. So if I hit tab now, it fills it up as far as it can because there's 2 folders that have algo starting with it. In this case, I'm going to type 99, hit tab, and then it knows where to go. I'm going to do code, bring up another VS Code window. All right, I'm going to toss this into a new desktop. And for this particular challenge, I don't feel like doing it alone. So I'm actually going to request the help of Raphael. Raphael, would you mind pair programming with me for this challenge?
I would love to.
All right, great. So the reason we're going to go through this sort of demo of pair programming is because all of you guys will be pair programming every Tuesday and Thursday. So pair programming, why program alone? So just to go over that, every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon for your challenges, you'll be working in a pair setting. Raphael and I will be creating the pairs for you, so you do not have to worry about finding a partner. Again, it'll be randomly assigned, so you get to hopefully meet a new student each afternoon. We'll create Zoom breakout rooms, so you guys can work in them, or you could work on Slack virtually, whatever video call mechanism, so that you guys have some good way to interact. But Zoom breakout rooms are usually the convenient way to go about doing pair programming. So we'll open those up. You and your partner will hop into your room and go at whatever challenges there are for the day. Pair programming is a great way to learn from each other. So again, I am not the best at every aspect of programming. I definitely have strong points and weak points. That's true for most programmers. So I'm not particularly good with SQL, for example. But if I was paired with someone else that's really knowledgeable about SQL, it's a great way to kind of absorb knowledge, kind of ask questions, make sure you kind of observe some of their knowledge if you feel like they're better at a particular skill than you are. And then again, it could go vice versa. You might be paired with someone that maybe you're a better coder than who you're paired with, or maybe you're not as quick with solving problems. Either way, it's good to either, when you're teaching someone, that kind of solidifies, hey, that you actually know the material, and if you could actually transfer it to someone else. And if you're, again, in the learning mode, just definitely take this opportunity to learn as much as you can, ask questions. However, this should be a collaborative process. So again, let's say you're paired with someone that's like super amazing with coding. That person should not do all the work and you just kind of sit there idly. Again, this should be collaborative. This should be a learning process and beneficial for all. So make sure you treat it that way. Also, it's a great way to kind of get to know your classmates one-on-one. Again, we have a large class here. It's not, and most of us are virtual. So not the best, way to kind of just like, chat with someone casually. But yeah, treat this as like a good, social interaction. Don't be like super focused and like, don't treat this as like, you have to just focus on coding and nothing else. Start up a conversation, talk about, this weekend, I watched some good football games. If you're a football fan, just strike up some personal conversations to make coding a little more fun and get to know your classmates too. Last thing I'll mention is, yes, this will be mandatory on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I will say up front, like sometimes, some of us may be thinking that I prefer working alone. I'm not looking forward to pair programming. Well, that's okay. You could have that mindset, but again, you're going to give this a try. Again, it is beneficial, again, from learning from each other, just doing things, again, where you're collaborating and seeing how someone else might do something. So again, you may be a great coder, but there's many ways to solve the same problem. So seeing other approaches, again, can kind of open some doors and kind of just have more conversations going. Andrew, you have a question?
Yeah. So since today is Tuesday, does that include today, or is it like starting afterwards from today?
Good question. We will be giving you your pair programming partners over lunchtime. And yes, for the afternoon, you will be pair programming today. So yep, we're gonna get started with pair programming as of today. All right, so just to go over just like a high level overview of what pair programming should kind of look like. Again, this isn't super structured, but there are just general tips. So the best way to kind of conceptualize the relationship for the pair is break it down into a driver and navigator roles. Now you can swap roles. So again, it's not someone's driver for the entire afternoon. Maybe you can swap between challenges or swap halfway through a challenge, whatever you guys decide. But usually you want one driver and one navigator. Obviously, you don't want two people driving the same car. That usually doesn't end well. But the driver is effectively the coder for the challenge that you work on. Whereas the navigator is the observer, kind of observing what is being written. So the driver, as I mentioned, writes the code. That's the person that should be sharing their screen, have a VS Code window open and typing in whatever code needs to be written. The navigator, again, doesn't sit idly by. The navigator is the one that should actually be instructing the driver what logic needs to be added. Now, they're not dictating like, hey, you need to write if true, then do this. Like, again, not word for word what to write, but just overall conceptually, like, okay, we need to implement a prompt so that we can take in some user input. So again, navigator just gives the heads up to the driver. The driver should just be focused on driving. The driver shouldn't worry about reading the requirements or reading the challenge. It's the navigator's job to understand what the requirements are, to understand what things need to be completed, and that conveying that to the driver. So the driver can just focus on solving the small tasks at hand. The navigator, again, should give an outlook for what path you're going on. So if you want to take this to like a literal example, let's say we're on the highway and I'm driving a car and I have a navigator. Let's say Raphael is my navigator. I'll be driving. I'm not looking at a map and looking at my GPS. Raphael will be looking at GPS and dictating to me what we're doing right now or what's going to happen. So you might be like, all right, we're going to continue on Interstate 95. We're going to take exit 15 in like 5 minutes. So I have some sense of where we're currently are or should be and where we're going to head with our road trip that we're taking. All right, so again, the navigator should lay out the path, and the driver should ask questions of like, all right, we need to stay on I-95, or we need to implement an input mechanism for our application. How do we do that? What do we need to input, or what question, what prompts do we need to send to the user? So that's, again, this should be a conversation. It shouldn't be quiet moments most of the time. It should be active and engaging for both participants. As the driver, you should try to vocalize what you are doing. And this is good practice, especially when you get to interviews. Interviewers kind of want to know your mindset. They don't want to just sit there and watch you code. They want to know what you're doing and why you're doing it. So as a driver, you should dictate as you're writing some logic. You should say, okay, now I'm going to add a window prompt so that we get user input. I'm going to capture that in a variable called input so that we can use it later. Kind of just, again, get familiar with verbalizing your thought process. That's going to be just good practice for interviews. In response to dictating what you're coding as a driver, the navigator should either confirm or push back on what the driver is saying. So as a driver, if I said, I'm going to create a for loop here to achieve this, navigator, if that's correct, the navigator says, yep, the for loop makes sense. We know how many iterations we need to do. Let's go on with it. But if the navigator realizes we're off track, the navigator should say, wait, we don't need to do a for loop. This should be an if statement. We just need to check one thing. All right, so that's, again, back and forth between the driver and navigator. Both navigator and driver can suggest ideas. So again, this is collaborative. It's not that the driver just sits there and is like a code monkey and just kind of just coding along. Always get to have a discussion like, hey, okay, we need to figure out how to implement this 99 bottle song. Let's think about it. What's the best way to do it? Should we use recursion? Maybe a for loop? Is there something else that we could think, or maybe Google? So again, both sides kind of suggest new ideas to make sure that you're coming up with a good solution. All right, so again, that's just a high level. Again, driver navigator is the good conceptual way to understand the two roles that should exist for pair programming. So we don't want two people coding at the same time, nor do we want too much chaos with two navigators and not getting anywhere. What questions do you guys have about pair programming? Okay, so Raphael and I can give you a quick demo with our next challenge. So we have 99 bottles. We cloned it down. We have it open in our VS Code. Raphael, do you want to be the driver or navigator here?
Well, since you've already got it opened up on your machine and you're sharing, can you drive and I'll navigate?
Sounds great. Yep.
All right. So yeah, you want to open the JS version?
Yep. So we're going to be coding in JavaScript. So let's start here.
All right. So we've already got our function defined. It's already being called. So looking at the desired output, it looks like there's a lot of repetitive output. I'm imagining we're gonna have to do a loop in here at some
Okay.
point. So
Do
why
you
don't we
think
just put a for loop in?
for loop? Okay. So we could write a for loop. Are we just going to start at 0 or are we going to start some other value here?
I'm not thinking too hard about it yet. Let's just start at 0. We'll
Okay.
change that later.
Gotcha. We're going to go to some length. We don't know how much that might be. So let's just put 10 and then probably count up in this case.
Sure.
Okay, so we got a basic for loop here.
So most of the work we're actually doing is console logging. So let's throw in a console log in there.
All right, so we're going to add a console log so that we could output to the terminal. Okay.
Just, the whole 99 bottles of beer, whatever.
All right, yeah, I think I have the README here, so I'm just going to copy. Should we copy one line or the whole song?
Just one line for now.
Yeah, because it's the repeating part. All right, so we have 99 bottles of beer on the wall. Okay, so we have a string. In this case, it's kind of hard coded 99 bottles of beer, but that should, in this case, we have a for loop going from 0 to 10. So that should print out this value 10 times if we've coded this correctly.
All right, so that's enough coding for now. Let's just run this and see what it does.
Yeah, definitely want to test intermittently. Good suggestion there. So let's do node. We're going to run this in a terminal. We'll do 99 bottles.js. Let's see what we get. So if I run this, Raphael, I believe we should get 10 outputs of 99 bottles of beer on the wall. Do you agree?
I do agree.
All right, let's give that a run. All right, so notice our terminal, we have output. We can count this up, but it looks like 5 and 5. Yep. So I think we are on the right track based on what we've coded.
Before we go on, I want to point out that what Ankur did just now was really important, where we're making predictions about what we think our program is going to do before we run it. I think it's really important that you're able to read the code, predict what's going to come out, and then ask yourself if you got what you were expecting. Because if you don't actually have specific expectations, you're never going to get what you expected. But anyways, so looks like we're getting something, not throwing any errors.
Yep.
But there's only 10 lines of output, and we're supposed to have, I guess, 99 lines of output, right?
Right. Yep.
So let's go up to 99 instead.
What if we create a variable? I'm going to create a variable, say num bottles maybe. So let's just store 99 in there for now. And we can use that here. So we have 99 bottles. So this should print out 99 times now since we changed that.
Sure.
Okay. What's our
Let's
next
see what
step
that
here?
does. I just want to see it. Can you just run it real quick?
Sure. All right, so I'm not going to count these, but it looks like we got a bunch of them. So I'm going to guess we have 99 of them.
I think that's a good guess. So the next problem I see here is that every line of our output is the same.
Yeah.
So if we're doing a for loop, in order to make every iteration of the loop different, our loop variable has to be inside there somewhere. So num bottles has to be used. So let's replace all the numbers that we see with the num bottles.
Okay, so we want to replace these 99s with num bottles?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to use string interpolation here. So that's a good way to get variables into a string. So I'm going to use backticks and then substitute the things that we want to be dynamic with the variable. So do $, curly braces, and then put in, you said num bottles?
Yep.
Okay, so we have num bottles here. I'm going to do a quick copy and paste. We have 99 here. And then should we do this maybe -1 because it's one lower?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's 99, 99, 98. So that makes sense.
Okay, cool. So we have this now using a variable. All right, what do we do next?
Run it.
Run it. Yep. Always good to incrementally run it. So it looks like our output's the same. We got 99 instances of it, and it says 99, 99, and 98.
Okay. So
yeah,
it looks like the problem here is that num bottles never changes.
Right.
Because we used to be looping, we used to just be using I, but now an I automatically increments in the for loop, but there's nothing that changes the value of num bottles.
Right. Yeah, it's a constant. So how can we maybe change that or use something else? What do you suggest?
There's a couple ways we could do this. I would have probably just used I for everything instead of num bottles, but we've come this far. Okay. So let's just decrement num bottles at the
All right, so I'm
Do
going
it
to
before or
decrement
after the console log.
num bottles after the console log. All right, so we print out a statement and then we subtract from num bottles. I assume we take one each time because we pass them around. So num bottles can be decremented by 1. I'm going to write the shortcut way just because we didn't do it the first time. We do num minus minus. Again, this is the same thing as what I wrote before. It's going to decrease the value of num bottles by a value of 1. Okay, so let's write some comments. I just want to make sure we're good on here. So decrease num by 1, and this is print output. All right, cool. I think that makes sense to me. So print output. So now that each time we go through this loop, we should get a new value of num bottles. Is that correct?
Hopefully. Let's see it.
Okay, yep. Let's confirm that we made the change we want. All right, there we go. So if we go to the very top, we start with 99 bottles. Looks like we have 99 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around 98. And it looks like, yep, the next line does actually go from 98, which I believe is how the song should go. So 98 bottles on the wall, 99 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around 97 bottles. Yeah, this looks like it's counting down, gets down to 49. I think that's because our num bottles is changing, and that's our limit here. So I think we're kind of not getting to the very end. We're getting like halfway because we're decreasing num bottles and I is going upward. So
yeah, we might have to rethink this. Let's refactor a little bit.
All right.
So
could we use maybe
so I think
I in here, as you said before?
Yeah, I think we want to just use one variable for both of these. So let's just put I instead of num bottles.
Okay. So right here?
Yep.
7. All right. I there. I there. Now we'll go here. I minus 1.
Yep.
Okay.
And then delete the num bottles variable on line 3.
All right.
And that one also, yeah. Or on line 3. I don't think we'll need that either.
Oh, gotcha. So this goes away?
Yep.
Okay, so we're putting 99 right here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so now let's run this and see what happens.
Sure thing. All right, so we're starting at 0 and we go, it looks like we're counting up, but we do get all of our iterations back. So we go from 0 to 98.
Okay, so we're getting probably the right number of iterations, but the wrong direction. So let's flip the for loop. Instead of going from 0 to 99, let's go 99 down to 0.
Yep, that seems sensible. So we're going to go all the way down. Let's go to 1 because we're not going to get to 0 bottles, I don't think. So in this case, we're flipping where we're starting. So again, we start with a high number. We're going down to a low number. Important to make sure you update your incrementing pieces here. So again, here I want to make sure we're decrementing. So now I will start at 99 and go downward. So go 99, 98. And I think if we make that change, let's give that a quick run. I think that does sound right, Raphael. Yep. So we are starting at 99, going down. Looks like we get all the way down to 1. So that looks very close to what we want here. Is there anything else that we have missed?
There's one thing that I can see that we missed, and that's when there's 1 bottle of beer. It's not grammatically formatted correctly.
Right.
We say 1 bottles of beer on the wall. It should just be 1 bottle singular.
Okay. How do you think we should handle this? Should we write an if statement to special case that or do something with our output here? I mean, I think I have an idea, but what if we create a bottles variable that has an S only when it's maybe greater than 1? Does that sound convoluted or does that work?
No, I think that's a good solution.
Okay, so I'm just gonna
I was thinking of something even more convoluted, so let's go with your idea.
All right, so I'm just gonna create a variable. Let's say let bottle string. So str is short form for string. Make it clear I'm intending to set a string here. So let's have bottle. I'm trying to think about this. So I'm kind of stuck here. Should I initialize it to a value or always update the value in the loop? What do you think, Raphael? So I'm thinking we could do maybe like if I is equal to 1, we could change bottle string to be bottle. Do you think this makes sense or is this not clean code? So bottles initially, and then since we're counting down, it'll only update the last value. Now, I don't know if that's, maybe not the greatest because that's kind of assuming that we're going downward.
Maybe start with bottle singular, and then if I is not equal to 1, just add an S to it.
Okay. So if we add an S, it's going to add it for each loop there, right? Or we could reassign it like that. Okay. But then we're going to need to update it when we get down to 1.
You probably want to declare bottle string on line 5 instead of line 3, so you're not, adding to it every loop.
Gotcha. Actually, yeah, I'm having a bit of a tough time kind of understanding what needs to be done here, so I'm kind of struggling here. Raphael, do you have live share installed by any chance?
I actually don't. I'm sorry. I didn't
No, that's
get
fine.
that.
So yeah, there's this feature called live share. It's kind of cool. So we'll definitely recommend check it out if you're pair programming. We're not going to insist that you have to use it, but it can be helpful in certain cases, especially, since a lot of us are virtual, we can't just peer over someone's shoulder and say, hey, this line needs to be here. Live share actually lets you share one screen. And if we were using live share here, Raphael would be able to kind of log into my project here, and you would see that he would have his own cursor on my window, and he could add, whatever he wanted while I'm looking at my screen. So it's not, we're sharing the same Visual Studio screen and same files, and we can make modifications kind of in tandem. We usually won't be typing at the same time, but it's kind of good. Like if I'm like, hey, I'm kind of stuck here, Raphael can kind of take over, kind of modify the code in front of my eyes. But in this case, we can kind of go with this approach. So, okay, so I want to create a bottle string, and so what was the suggestion here? Move.
So line 3 should go to line 5.
Okay.
So we want to reinitialize that
Gotcha.
every iteration.
Okay.
So we're not just constantly adding more and more S's.
Gotcha.
And then on line 7, I'll say bottle string plus equals S. Yeah, like that.
Okay. And then I think we need to use that new variable down here. Just that $ and bottle string.
Yep. I would have totally forgotten that. So it's a good thing we're working on this as a pair.
But okay, so when we get down to 1, that should be, but we also need to update this bottles. So we'll handle that shortly, I guess. But all right, so we get that. Let's just update all of them. All right, let's see what changes this made. Hopefully we got some improvement. So look at the bottom. Yep, we got 1 bottle. That is grammatically correct now, 1 bottle. 0 bottle, I think that should be plural,
that's not
right?
quite right.
And also
this
1 bottle, yeah, right there.
So let's back up. Let's take a different approach to this.
Okay. I like it.
Can you just delete lines 4 through 7?
Yep. So how can we achieve this? So it looks like, again, we have a current value, which is these 2 values, and then we have the new value, which needs the new bottle.
So let's define a helper function outside of bottle song. We'll call it format bottle string.
I think I like this idea. All right, this should take in something.
Yeah, we'll just call it N, I think, just number of bottles.
Okay. What should this function return?
So if N is 1, just the string bottle.
We'll do triple equals, just the extra sure, return bottle.
And then otherwise, return bottles.
Okay, so we could add an else here and then return bottles, but one kind of, I wouldn't even call it a trick, but this is, this works because if N equals 1, we're going to return bottle. If for every other case, we're going to hit this return statement. So this, again, is totally correct code. However, my preferences don't necessarily mean best practice, but I think it's easier for me to read if I just have a return down here. This is effectively doing the same thing. It's saying if we get into this branch return, it's not going to proceed after this line of code. Because anytime you hit a return statement, that means get out of this function and return whatever we're returning. So this line of code will not be hit if we get into this if statement. Now, some other developers might argue like this, have that if else statement there. The reason I prefer this is this guarantees that one return statement will be hit. If you have like else's with ifs, there's no guarantee that any one of those will kind of hit there. I don't know if that made sense, but in this case, I'm just going to format it this way. But understand that this is effectively an if and else. Either this will happen or this will happen. Okay, so we have this helper function. What should we do with this helper function?
So I actually kind of prefer it the other way, but
Okay.
Ankur's driving right now, so we're doing it his way. Um, so we've got our helper function.
Okay.
So now we no longer have bottle string. So let's delete all the places where we use that.
Okay, I think we're gonna probably use the function there.
Yeah,
Okay, so I'm gonna plug in I here because that's me bottles we're showing.
right.
And I guess I could call the function again here. I don't want to rethink that later, but okay, so we have that. And then here we have I minus one. So I'm thinking, Raphael, that we pass I minus one here, right? So we have that
Yep.
correct value. Okay, that makes sense to me. Let's add some comments here. Always good to have descriptions. Determine the proper singular plural form of. Okay, cool. So we have this helper function. That's definitely a better idea than when I was going down. So thank you, Raphael. Okay, cool. Should we run this? Let's see how it goes.
See it.
Run that. All right, let's check what we're checking first. We got 2 bottles plural, but in that line we do have 1 bottle singular, so that's excellent. We got 1 bottle here, 1 bottle here, and the question was 0. Hey, look at that. 0 is handled appropriately because it's plural. Awesome. That was a great suggestion.
Cool. Looks good to me.
All right. Have we met all of our objectives, Raphael?
All the basic objectives. We haven't done the bonuses.
Okay. What are the bonuses?
There was the one to do it recursively, and I forgot what the other one was.
Gotcha. I think we need one last line here, though, right? So
yeah.
if we get down to 0, I think that we could do this in our for loop if we go down to 0, but I'm suggesting we just do that at the very end. If that
would be my preference.
Okay. So we do a console log. We could just hard code this because this doesn't need any variables in it. So let's do a console log, surround us in double quotes. And just want to make sure the output here. So it looks like they're putting it on a new line. So I'm going to slide in a couple new lines here, /n for a new line here, and a /n for a new line here. So we kind of match the output. Let's take a look at our song. I do not have a good singing voice, so I'm not going to recite this for you. Looks like I have an error. Good chance to look at reading error messages. So when you get an error, errors are going to happen. No one writes perfect code. Always make sure you try to look at the error message and see where it's trying to point you. A common pattern that we've noticed for early developers is, hey, you run the code, it doesn't work, and you kind of you might be throw your hands up like, I don't know what's wrong. Again, always try to diagnose your problem. If you're still stuck, again, Raphael mentioned the 20-minute rule. If you look at your error, Googled, and your 20 minutes have kind of lapsed, and you're like, I can't figure this out, I don't know where this error is coming from, definitely reach out. Again, we don't want you to be stuck on an error for the entire afternoon of coding. But here, I'm going to try to look at my error message. It says, all right, so most of the time, it'll give you, a correct line message or a line to look at. So it looks like JS line 20. So it's pointing me to my 20th line. So let's take a look at that. All right, so this is line 20 right here. And then it's kind of highlighting this and saying missing parentheses after argument list. So looks like I've forgotten my closing parentheses. Again, it's my goof there. So I can add a closing parentheses here. It also looks like I have an extra quotation mark here. Notice that VS Code is kind of helpful here. It kind of highlights it in red, telling you there's some syntax error here. So you kind of hover over it. Sometimes it tells you exactly what's wrong. Sometimes it's not as smart to pick it up. But in this case, I know I have an extra quote here. So I'm going to delete that. All right, looks like there's no red squiggly lines here. Let's try rerunning this. Okay, there we go. We got our song going. I think we have an extra space here. Let me clean that up. And let's get the song going. All right, so there's our song. It looks correct. Again, there's a lot of lines here. But yeah, we start at 99 bottles of beer on the wall, 99 beers, go down to 98, scroll all the way to the bottom. And yeah, I think this is a working solution. Do you agree, Raphael?
I like it.
Awesome. Thanks for navigating me. I love your suggestion about this helper function, made things a lot easier to do. So when we get to a working solution, always be mindful of making improvements. Now, sometimes you don't always have time, right? Like if you have 7 challenges to get to, don't spend too much time trying to improve your code, but always take a second look at it, say, hey, this works. How can I make it better? So I know one thing when I was coding this that I noticed is that we're actually calling our function for format bottle string 2 times here with the same value, right? We're calling it with the value of I twice. Now, this isn't a huge deal, but this is inefficient because we're doing the same work twice when we only really need to do it once. So if I were refactoring this, one small refactor that would improve efficiency, again, this is 99 loops, so we're calling the same function 99 extra times than we need to. Now, that's not a whole lot for a computer, right? 99 extra something for a computer is not a lot. But if we're doing this like a million times, that's going to be potentially a million extra computations we're doing that we can avoid. That's going to just make our algorithm faster the more times we have to do it. So here, one session I would have would be create a variable here, call it let plural, or let current count bottles. Again, it's kind of a long variable, maybe not the best naming. We're going to store the return value of that function here so that I can reuse that variable in 2 places. So instead of calling my function twice, I'm just going to call it once and use it twice here. You guys understand why that is more efficient? Because we don't have to do this twice. Again, this is a pretty simple function, but if you can kind of expand your imagination and say, like, what if this were a super complex computation and we're doing that twice? If we can cut out work, we definitely should opt to cut it out, because again, redundancy is not needed here. Were there any questions about this challenge or anything we mentioned? So again, I made a refactor change. I should also verify that I did not mess up my output. So let's give this a quick run.
Kurt,
Was there questions? Sorry.
I have a quick question. So correct me if I'm wrong. When I'm reading the README file at the 0 bottles, it seems like it goes straight to no more bottles instead of 0 bottles.
Oh, it says no more. Okay, I see. So that is another case we need to handle. Thank you, Yulin. Yep, we definitely need to handle that. So I think we could handle that here. Thanks for pointing it out. What if we special case n equals 0? We could return no more. So instead of returning 0, this would be no more bottles, I think. No more.
Well, the issue is we want to format the number, not
Gotcha.
the word bottles.
You're right. So what if we have another helper function?
I think so.
Function format counts, and it's going to do a quick copy and paste if you guys don't mind. So if n equals 0, the count should be no more. No more. Else we return n. Okay, so we have format count. So here, instead of putting I, we could pass in format counts of I. Oops, sorry. Thanks for catching that, Yulin. We definitely should make sure we meet all the requirements. So good lesson, and always double check your requirements, make sure you haven't missed anything. This is important for interview questions. Very easy to kind of miss a requirement. And again, interviewers are going to be mindful of, hey, do you fully understand the question and meet all the objectives, not just some of them. So in this case, format count minus 1 is what I want there. Let's see if that changes things for us. So I'm going to run this down here. So at the very bottom, we should see one more bottle of beer on the wall, one more bottle of beer. Take one down, pass around. No more bottles of beer on the wall. I think that's correct. No more bottles of beer on the wall. No more bottles of beer. Go to the store and buy some more. All right. I think that is correct now. Thank you for pointing that out, Dylan. Porfi, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. What is it called when we use the dollar sign and the curly brackets inside of a string?
Great question. Yeah, we're going to go over this a bit more in detail, but this is called string interpolation. It uses the backticks, which is the key right underneath your escape key on the top left of your keyboard, assuming you have a standard keyboard. But this allows you to kind of embed some variables inside your string. There's other ways to do this. You can kind of build your string with variables and string literals, but this is kind of just a convenient way to kind of merge strings and variables together. But yeah, we'll talk more about that. But again, that's called string interpolation. Yep, good question. Any other questions about 99 bottles of beer? We have 2 hand raises. Jidan.
Yes, so when you declare a variable, when you say I equals 99, you said let I equals 99. Could you explain the difference between let and var and const?
Yep, yeah. Excellent question. I'm going to actually table that for a second because we're going to go over that in our lecture today. But yeah, there are 3 ways you can declare a variable. So just to kind of give you a teaser, there's var, there is let, and there's also const. Each one of these lets you create a variable, but they have a slightly different function or a different use case. And we'll talk about that in our lecture. So yeah, thanks for asking that question. We'll definitely cover that.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Any other questions? Brendan.
Yes, maybe it's a distinction I'm not really sure about, but when you're running through your loop and you have your current bottles equals format bottle string I, how is it not running the format bottle strings I program every time? Like, what's the distinction between that and just putting how you had it before?
Excellent question. So here I actually still have some inefficient code. So I'm glad I kind of accidentally had that. So the question Brendan asked is, why is this more efficient than what I was doing before? Well, let's take a look at what I just snuck in here. I have format counts that's calling a function, right? So we created a helper function. Right here, I'm calling the function 1 time on line 27. But if you look further on, I'm calling it a second time with the same value. So in this case, I'm making 2 function calls, one right here and one right here, and it's doing the same exact thing, right? The value of n is the same for both of these calls, right? I'm passing I here, I there. So I'm getting the same return value here. In this case, I don't need to do this twice because I'm getting the same result each time. So in that case, the change we made for the format bottle string is we call it 1 time for each iteration. So you're right, for each loop, we do need to call it because the value of I changes for each loop. But when the value of I is the same, we don't need to call this function twice on this line. We can call it 1 time. So let's make that change here. Let current counts equals format counts. Here, and then we can use this variable inside right here and inside right here. Now we still need to do it for I minus 1 because that's going to give us a different result. So we could throw that into a variable, but in this case, we call format count once for I minus 1 and format bottle string for I minus 1. So in that case, I'm just keeping them in place because we got to do them somewhere. Again, it might be easier to understand if I broke them out to variables. Definitely ways to clean up the code to make it more understandable. Did that answer your question?
For 12 years
Yeah,
and
thank
the
you.
American Heart.
Yelin, do you have a question?
Yes, just regards the string interpolations. I've seen there's also another way using plus sign. I'm wondering, is there like a major reason that makes you choose between one or the other?
Are you talking about maybe doing something like this where I have character count and do plus?
And with the quotation.
Yeah, so in this case, it can work, but there might be issues. For example, if these are 2 integers, it might treat this as an integer addition rather than a string addition. So like if you have 1 and 1, let's say current count is 1 and current count bottles happens to be a numeric value, it might actually add these together rather than adding the strings together. So string interpolation, I prefer just because it makes every value become a string value versus, again, the plus sign for 2 integers has a different impact than if this was an integer and this were a string. In this case, it would work because current count bottles returns a string versus format count returns an integer or a string. I guess I could make this a string if I wanted to. But yeah, you can build up a string this way. So this is not string interpolation. This is kind of just building a string by pieces. So yeah, this can work too. That's definitely a different way to do it. Not wrong by any means.
I want to add
Justin?
real quick. String interpolation, like Ankur is showing you, is a relatively new feature in JavaScript. So if you're seeing code that just uses the plus sign to add a bunch of strings together, it might just be older code, or the person learned to code a long time ago or something. But generally, I think adding strings with a plus sign is really frustrating and error prone and hard to read. So you should prefer string interpolation.
And
Also-
if I'm not mistaken, I think adding strings also is a little more inefficient because each string creates a temporary string that you add onto. So I think that's another reason maybe not to use the plus sign. But again, it's not wrong. It definitely can work.
I wouldn't
'Cause-
be as worried about the performance, but that is interesting to know.
And will the $ interpolation like automatically adjust the space between the string in the front and the behind it? Because I know plus sign does have that issue when you like write them close together, it won't actually leave that space between each string and the verb we put in.
In string interpolation, yes, I have a space here, so that space is honored. For the addition, I'm not quite sure what you might be mentioning. Because if you have two strings that you're adding, like string 1 plus string 2, the space here does not matter. I could have 20 spaces here. That's just, it's still going to treat this as adding two values together. These spaces are not captured.
Thank you.
Okay. So if you did want a space here, you need to manually have a space and add that together if you're adding strings. I think I was going with the format count here. Any other questions, Justice?
Yes, so when you were doing the interpolation, you said you needed to call the function a second time and decrement it. So if you were to interpolate the actual same way you're doing it before, if you were to put the variable that you declared and then just decrement that by 1, would that not work?
For my format count?
Yeah, when you took it, so you're calling it inside of the console log. Now you set it to current count bottles, current count, either of those.
Yep.
So I'm looking at format count. Yeah, I-1. Would
Yep.
you not be able to just set that to current count -1?
So I think that probably will work, but the case here is sometimes format count returns no more. So if we do no more -1, that may not, so again, if we count, we're calling format count here with I-1. Again, format count might return no more. So we do like 0 like no more -1. That's gonna get us to a weird situation where we're like subtracting 1 from a string. It probably will work because we're turning an integer here. So might work, but in this case, I'd rather just call that function again because this function might return something that's not numeric.
Sure, thank you.
Yep, and then yeah. Thank you for your questions. Any other questions on this challenge? Okay, so again, thank you, Raphael, for pair programming with me. You guys will be pair programming this afternoon. Again, we'll send out those pair programming assignments sometime around lunch after lecture. So, all right, so we have completed this challenge. Let's do a git add, git commit, completed 99 bottles in JavaScript with Raphael. Okay, and then we'll do a git push origin. So when you are pair programming, you and your pair can just submit one pull request. You both don't need to submit it. But with that said, I'd make sure that both of you guys have a copy of the code in your personal GitHub so that you can reference it later. So make sure you both get a copy of the code, even if one of you is coding it. So I pushed this up to 99 bottles. Let's refresh. Yep, 25 seconds ago. Let's do a quick pull request. Since this was pair programming, we're going to put both mine and Raphael's names so that we can, when we see it from our instructor side, we know that it was a pair programming assignment. So let's say Encore plus Raphael's solution. And this was 99 bottles in JS. All right, so that's our pull request. Hit create pull request, and it's doing something. Got my check mark. So yep, looks like a lot of you guys submitted it. So we have 36 pull requests here. If you forgot to do it, not end of the world, just submit a pull request. We like to kind of keep track of how you guys are doing with challenges. I will admit we don't go through each solution hand by hand, just because again, it's a lot of challenges to go through. This is the challenges every day are for your benefit. Let me actually stop recording here.